Welcome to the Happy Mindset, episode 141. Today's episode is called Unconscious Culture. This is something that I've come up with. To be honest, it's probably been come up by somebody else. Whenever I've thought that I've come up with something, I've just heard about it later on, so I'm not going to claim that I've come up with this, but it was something that just got me thinking recently, that a few months ago I think I noticed the word cult in culture. Not a big revelation or anything. I think the way I saw that is because I've spent a lot of time thinking about culture. I've spent a lot of time thinking about individuals. I spend a lot of time thinking about how do we lose ourselves in the group. Uh, what's the term for that? De-individuation? Talk about that when it comes to fans, football fans, fans in general. So there are benefits to being a fan. You've got this group identity. But there's a difference between being in a tribe of people where you're developing your skills, you're developing some sort of craft, where you're getting to know yourself, and belonging to a group that's based off of liking something else, based off of their wins, their losses. You don't get a sense of individuation from belonging to a group like that. For good, for better or for worse, it's just good to be aware of this stuff, that if you feel that you're actually losing a part of yourself to the group, it's not even just sports or anything, it's whenever you're in a group where you don't feel like you're cultivating your own sense of autonomy, sense of direction, cultivating a skill set there, that you're not belonging to a tribe. It's good to take a step back and realize that, well, I'm not going to get this from a group. And that ties into unconscious culture, because you could assume that by being a part of a group, that it will get all these needs met for you. But if you're not clear on what your needs are, then you're going to be left kind of disappointed when you realize that, geez, I don't actually get much fulfillment or meaning from this. Because you could arrive at the conclusion, and there's no sense of meaning and fulfillment from life. Life is pointless. I'm just making the best of a bad situation. So it's good to take a step back and realize that you can have unconscious culture that you live in where you've never really took the time to consider that maybe it's not thinking about these things that's holding you back rather than the things themselves, or conscious culture. So you can shift into a conscious culture. The thing is, it's so much easier to live in an unconscious culture because you don't have to think for yourself. There are certain benefits to an extent, because it is taxing cognitively to have to think through things for yourself. It's not an easy thing to do, and it takes a very long-term approach to it as well. You're not going to solve all your problems in one day, and you're not going to figure out what you like. You're not going to figure out who you are in one day. It's going to be a long-term experimentation process. To be honest, I don't think it ever ends, but because it's fulfilling and meaningful, you wouldn't really want it to end anyway. So with the shift to conscious culture from unconscious culture, it can seem daunting at the start. That's why I wouldn't tend to think about it. I think I've only been thinking about it because I've gone through a good chunk of experience already where I've been living from this without fully knowing that that's what I was doing. Where I'm starting to see potential is in community. That's something that I'm exploring more this year, a sense of community. It wasn't something I'd ever really thought too much about over the last few years. I've been more focused on individuation myself from a group. There's that self-actualization process, and I've done that through writing in the podcast. So just to give myself that sense of who I am, sense of autonomy, proper skill sets, so that I can just stand out. I'm moving now more towards thinking about community. I hadn't really thought about that for the last, however long, for the last few years, and I haven't really put a lot of consideration into community, because I used to associate community, or up until now, I've been associating community with group. And I've always not liked the group, but I didn't have the language, I didn't have the understanding, I didn't have a focus that could help me to navigate this stuff. So when I thought about forming a community, I used to think about a group and the feelings that would come up for me for being a part of a group. And the type of feelings that would come up for me when I would think about being in a group, they weren't feelings that I enjoyed. types of feelings that would come up would be this feeling of needing to stand out within the group, needing to have my voice heard, needing to be right on things. Kind of associated with a lot of conflict, a lot of, when I thought about groups, I would think of bitching, infighting, politics. I would think of not knowing where you stand with people. I would think of inauthenticity. I would think of all the stuff that I don't particularly like. So I couldn't really conceptualize or imagine community being something different. And I'm still in that learning process because it's something new to me, it's something unknown. I don't think I've ever experienced that. So that's where I would have been stuck in my thinking a few years back. When I thought of the group, I felt powerless because a group is bigger than an individual. And I felt powerless to change anything. I didn't even know what change would look like because I didn't realize you'd have to start with the individual. So if I want to have a different group, if I want to have a different understanding of group and community, then I need to change as an individual because I'm not able to conceptualize and I'm not able to imagine something different. So I started from the point of view of individuation, really getting to know myself, shifting from an unconscious culture. I was part of a group. I'll take the example of education here. So when I was living in an unconscious culture with regards to education and learning, I had all these assumptions about learning that wasn't true. I didn't like learning because it felt like it was something I was told to do, that I had to do. I saw it as an obligation. I saw my pathways in life as being very limited and defined by somebody else. When I thought of education, I just felt this powerlessness and this helplessness. I didn't see education and learning as truly something that would be empowering in my life, something that I would enjoy doing. I saw it as an obligation to society, to other people. I saw it as very rigid. I actually associated with killing my dreams, killing my imagination, conformity. These were all the types of things that were in unconscious culture for me around education, up until about 22, when I left the system and I discovered language hacking and I started thinking for myself. That's when things changed. And so since then, I've been forming a conscious culture on an individual level around education and learning. And that's what I want to share with other people. Then that's when I start thinking about community now. Because up until recently, I still had associations of group with community. Now I'm starting to see them as different so that I can understand what I'm trying to create here. So with conscious culture around education, I would see creativity at the core of it, because creativity leads to the capacity to think for yourself. It also leads to enjoyment in the process of creating. There's more of a focus on the process itself. So these are the types of things that I'm looking to shift in the culture around education. Because I've seen the shift in myself. I've had 10 years now at least of experience of experiencing education and learning in a different way. And how to tie that to something that's meaningful for me. So as I navigate my way through life, I've got one eye on the financials, making my life financially possible. So that means developing skill sets that the marketplace right now demands. But I've also got another eye on meaning, something meaningful, something that I can say, I'm glad I created that. If I wasn't alive today, this version of what I've created wouldn't exist. So I think for me that's very important as well, because without that element of things, I wouldn't feel alive. I wouldn't feel like life has any meaning to me. Like I said at the start of this episode, if you didn't start exploring this stuff in your own way, you could arrive at the conclusion unconsciously that there is no meaning to life. There's no purpose, there's no direction, because that's the sense you get from living in a group. The best thing you can get to is to align yourself with take the footballing example there, align yourself with a successful football team, so by proxy you get some sort of feelings of victory when they win, but you're not getting any sense of individuation, not getting any sense of who you are as a person. And yeah, the way I look at it is that's just it's the way I look at it, it's settling for second best in life. You could be doing a lot more with your potential and a lot more with your skills and discovering things for yourself. And so this is a continuous process for me. I'm learning with this, especially the community element. That's something that's very new to me. I'm still navigating my way with this because I've reached a point too where I've understood, where I'm starting to see that me doing things by myself isn't scalable. It isn't something that's going to have much impact. I guess I've been actually learning a little bit over time because I've been having guests on the podcast, and from my writing as well, I actually engage with people on Medium sometimes as well, other writers. So it has been kind of trickling in a bit. But if you're somebody who struggles with this group, because my struggle is that when I was around a group of people, I would become somebody I wasn't. And it wasn't even an intentional thing. It was just more out of like, I would either just not talk a lot because I would feel insecure about talking around these people who didn't really know me, or I'd just kind of, I just didn't find it engaging. I just found it awkward. I felt socially awkward in a group of people. I felt like I had to behave in a certain way, and I had to figure out how am I supposed to behave in these scenarios. And so when I had all these kind of associations with groups, so for me it's been difficult to try and create something for a group of people, a tribe of people, when I've been thinking about groups like that for a long time, because that has been my experience. It's not like I intentionally tried to think about groups that way, because it's been a hindrance to me, it's been a limit on me. It's actually because I've had a lot of experience in the past of operating within groups like that, that I didn't really want to recreate that experience again. So I've been wary of doing that again. But if you're somebody who's like that as well, where you've struggled with that, I think especially if you're somebody who's introverted, who likes thinking about things, who likes exploring your own inner world, you probably will find groups challenging. And then the conundrum here is that when you're creating something for a tribe of people, how do you think about these people? I think some of it actually boils down to experience. As you start to see the people who are interacting with what you're doing, taking notice of what you're doing, it helps, because when I thought of groups, also there was like this resistance. I used to think of the people who would criticize me, because I guess when I was within those groups, I was acting in a certain way because I was looking to not be criticized by other people and be made fun of and stuff like that. So when I'm putting my stuff out there, I was thinking of groups of people like that they're gonna start criticizing me now because I'm not playing to the script. I'm not acting out how I should be acting. This, of course, is all in my own mind, but this is the kind of struggle that you're going to go through. That's why I'm talking about it today, talking from shifting from unconscious culture to conscious culture, because it will help you with this process. Because as I'm speaking about this stuff, as you bring it out into the open, there's a certain amount of fear around that dissipates. You can see what the fear is then. And that's the general kind of process of shifting from unconscious culture to conscious culture. That's what I've been navigating with this podcast, with my writing. What I want to do here is to create a culture around self-education, a conscious culture around it, for whatever people resonate with that. Because I had a lot of pain associated with education before. Yeah, I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all, and it's been a complete reversal now that I've switched to actually consciously creating a culture around education and learning, and it feels something that's more empowering, something I actually want to do. So that's what I want to give other people. That's the culture I'm creating here, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. It's a bit of a different episode, playing with different ideas there, different bits of wordplay. This is the experimentation process as a creative as well. You will often be on the verge of thinking about new things, tying things together, getting new insights. That's the joy of it, though. That's it. It's a little bit messy, but that's actually the joy. That's why you do it. So that's it. That's what I wanted to cover today. Thanks again for listening, and I will speak to you on the next episode.